Welcome to this webinar covering placement and retention services. My name is Evie Wold, and I work with placement services at Vocational Rehabilitation Services. The training objectives today are to be able to define placement and retention services, understand the importance of pre-job search activities, know the key components of a job search, and to understand the conditions for a successful closure from placement and retention services. The information we are reviewing today can be found on the Deed Public website under the Community Partner Resource section. If you haven't already printed the related documents, please pause this webinar and print the following documents prior to viewing. We'll be referencing the forms throughout the webinar. Keep the Placement and Retention Services overview handy during the webinar, as we'll be referencing this often. Let's look at the list of potential placement services that may be provided to an individual to assist them with their job search. Keep in mind that all services are tailored to meet the needs of each individual. Identifying and developing job opportunities. This may involve researching the labor market, contacting employers, showing the job seeker resources like career force classes, researching jobs on Minnesota Works and other job boards, assisting with creating and updating resumes. This is most often an ongoing process, tailoring their resume to fit the job seeker is currently applying for. Completing employment applications, paper and online. We know this can be very challenging, and also assisting with the various pre-employment tests that many employers use, such as personality and aptitude tests. Preparing for job interviews. Reviewing and practicing sample interview questions, arranging mock interviews when possible, and also informational interviews when needed. Completing cover and thank you letters, also discussing the importance and value of these letters with the job seeker, and possibly creating templates for them to use. Making sure the job is a good match. Be sure to assess the position and the environment and determine any needed accommodations or supports. Working with employers to identify and eliminate barriers. This may include suggesting modifications and/or supports, addressing structural and attitudinal barriers. Keep in mind, placement services are not limited to this list. Retention services is an umbrella name for those services provided to assist the individual with their adjustment to employment. It includes both job coaching and follow-up. This is an important time in the placement process. Sometimes retention services can require as much or more time and effort than placement services to ensure a successful employment outcome. As the individual gets acclimated to their new position, retention services continue. Placement professionals may need to continue to identify and coordinate the services needed to maximize the person's skill development and assist the individual in maintaining or advancing in their employment. Retention services are very individualized based on the person's unique vocational rehabilitation needs. The beginning of the placement and retention services process consists of pre-job search activities. You'll find the pre-job search activities on the visual shown here under the red arrow. These are activities the VRS counselor and the job seeker should review and discuss prior to placement services beginning. Let's take a closer look at these activities. During the pre-job search activities, the counselor will review and discuss the following with the job seeker: the placement team approach and the roles of each team member. As a reminder, the counselor is the facilitator of the team, and all team members have roles and expectations. In addition to the core team, other team members may include family, social workers, and possibly independent living staff. Informed choice. If possible, the job seeker is encouraged to visit or interview a variety of placement professionals, as it is ultimately the job seeker's choice who they use for their placement and retention services. Interests, goals, skills, abilities, and any criminal background as they relate to the labor market. For those individuals who want to explore how their credit or bankruptcy histories may impact their job goal, VRS counselors often use the Federal Trade Commission's website. This slide is a continuation of all the items the counselor and the job seeker will review and discuss in preparation for the invitation to placement and review ongoing throughout placement and retention services. They will be reviewing items such as transportation, housing, childcare, medical, insurance, cultural disability disclosure, and other employment authorization documents. To verify those documents, counselors often use the USCIS as a good resource to see what documents are acceptable for employment, such as a state ID and Social Security card. We're not allowed to make a copy of the documents, but the counselors should be viewing them to ensure the job seeker has the appropriate documents and is ready to go. If a job seeker is involved with an agency-approved project, such as individual placement and support, many of the pre-job search activities are completed jointly with the VRS counselor, placement provider, and like the mental health provider. No invitation to placement team form is completed. The IPS placement person uses their time getting to know the job seeker as the process involves such rapid engagement. In addition to IPS, if the job seeker is in customized employment and completing a discovery assessment, the placement professional and the counselor should consult to ensure the pre-job search activities are addressed and documented in the CE plan. There are also items that are continuously reviewed and discussed throughout the placement process. You will see these services in the ribbon under the box. Disability disclosure, supported employment, independent living services, benefit services, job coaching, and reasonable accommodations should be considered before placement services begin and also throughout the entire placement and retention services process. When the VRS counselor sends you an invitation to the placement team, they will also send a copy of the assessment of VR needs and the completed sample employment application. The invitation to placement team form is used to invite the placement professional to join the team. Let's take a look at the information on the invitation to placement team form. You will notice the contact information for the job seeker, supplementary documentation that will be sent with the invitation, job goals and considerations related to the job seeker's goals, and disability information. The assessment of VR needs is also included with the invitation to placement. This is completed by the counselor and is a narrative representation of the job seeker's unique strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, and interests. The VRS counselor will also send a completed sample employment application along with the invitation. Please refer to the sample employment application you printed for this webinar. Let's take a look at that now. As you can see on the form, this is a generic job application that is prepared for you to assist with placement services and the development of a resume. Out of respect and courtesy to you in your preparation for the meeting, it is preferred and recommended that all these items will be given to you, the placement professional, at the same time. And as a reminder, with IPS, there'll be no invitation to placement, and with customized employment, there will be an invitation, and it should go along with the assessment of VR needs, the sample employment application, and the customized employment plan. Let's look at the job search key components that begin with the signed placement plan meeting, which is the first milestone and is a PBA payment milestone. You, the placement professional, lead the conversation and discussion with the job seeker and the VRS counselor through the development of the placement plan. Let's take a look at the placement plan now. This is the VRS placement plan. It's very important to discuss the expectations of each party involved and that each core team member sign the placement plan. The VRS placement plan is a template for identifying the responsibilities of each of the core team members, the job seeker, the placement professional, and the VRS counselor. These responsibilities should be identified and agreed upon by the team during the placement plan meeting. Not all items will be applicable to each job seeker. Select only the items that apply. If you use your own placement plan form rather than the VRS placement plan, and the roles and responsibilities for all team members are identified on your placement plan, we need you to be sure the roles and responsibilities for everyone are identified and discussed. Be sure to include this information in your summary report of the meeting. We will discuss the summary report on the next slide. We're not there yet. Only one placement plan form is needed, as it all goes back to the experience of the job seeker and making their experience with us as positive as possible. Some of our community partners use the VRS plan and some items to it and add some items to it for their needs. Everyone gets a copy of the signed plan. During the placement plan meeting, the 60-day meeting is scheduled. We'll discuss the 60-day meeting in a little while. It's important to consider the meeting's intent and purpose. It's the first meeting with all the core team members, the job seeker, the placement professional, and the VRS counselor. The meeting is to establish rapport with the job seeker for meaningful discussion and sharing ideas regarding their job search. It is about the job seeker and what all of us need to do as a team to help them achieve success. Try to focus on creating a positive experience for them. The meeting shouldn't be about completing all the required forms in our paperwork other than the placement plan and possibly a release of information. It's an expectation of the placement team approach that you will complete any of the necessary paperwork ahead of time, so the meeting focus will truly be about the job seeker and their needs. Next, we'll talk about the summary report for the signed placement plan meeting. Please refer to the summary report form. Let's take a look at that now. The summary report should reflect the names, titles, and agency of all who attended and their input at the meeting. The summary report should capture the discussion and decisions that came from the meeting and is the responsibility of the placement professional. It will also have the date of the first 60-day check-in meeting that everyone has agreed to, and also will indicate when the job seeker and placement professional are meeting for the first time to continue working together on a job search. Remember, the summary report or an email that includes the information from the summary report template, along with an invoice, must be received by VRS prior to approving payment for the first PBA milestone. On the slide, we'll be referencing the communication update form. Let's take a look at that form. On this form, you can see general information about job search activities, meetings, and employer activities. All placement professionals will attempt at least weekly communication with the job seeker and explain weekly assignments that the job seeker and placement professional will each complete. This is a minimum standard to be adjusted based on the individual needs. We realize situations may occur where a job seeker or placement professional may not be able to communicate each week as scheduled, but attempts should be made. When you develop a resume for the job seeker, please be sure a copy is shared with VRS. The twice monthly written communications are required and continue throughout the entire placement and retention services process. This is the minimum level of communication, and they're not meant to replace additional phone calls or other types of communication that should certainly occur between the placement professional and the VRS counselor. You can utilize and email the communication update form, or you may send a narrative email with the same information that's requested on the form by the 1st and the 15th of each month. The next step in the process is the 60-day check-in. The 60-day check-in is an in-person meeting. It will take place 60 days after the signed placement plan meeting and will recur every 60 days until the job seeker obtains employment. This meeting is an opportunity to review progress, discuss any barriers that have arisen and identify solutions, assess the job goal and amend as needed, and brainstorm together to implement new strategies. Since this meeting recurs every 60 days until the job seeker becomes employed, the next 60-day meeting should be set up prior to concluding the meeting. Once the job seeker has been offered employment, there's a lot to consider. Contact the VRS counselor when a job offer has been received. Discuss with VRS counselor and the job seeker any needed supports, any uniform, work clothing, or shoes, reasonable accommodations or assistive technology needs, transportation arrangements to and from work, scheduling conflicts such as medical appointments or childcare. Address any new discoveries regarding the job seeker's background and barriers to successful employment. Some examples might be changes in previously arranged childcare or transportation, new duties on the job that were not anticipated. Consider meeting with the job seeker to assist with preparation for the first day at work and orientation. This can be helpful for the individual, especially if they're anxious about starting work. Discuss any questions they may have or assist in completing any paperwork for their new job. If they're receiving any government benefits, ensure the individual understands their responsibility to report their earnings. Communicate with the employer as appropriate and convey the findings to the VRS counselor as necessary. The first shift of employment is the second placement milestone and is a payment milestone under a PBA. It is extremely important for you to contact the VRS counselor as soon as possible with information regarding the job. Job information can be detailed on the communication update form under Details of Accepted Job Offer. Let's take a look at that. That's on the second page. This information includes the company name, the address, the job title, start date, hours, wages, level of benefits, and the person who provided and obtained the information. You can also see on that form on closure, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the same information is requested. There was recently a Minnesota law enacted requiring employers to give offer letters to every new employee. This was part of the Minnesota wage theft law and went into effect on July 1st, 2019. This offer letter would be a great way to collect the employment information needed by VRS. To receive payment for the second PBA milestone, you may submit the communication update form or an email with the same information that's requested on the form, along with an invoice. The level of support provided once a person has started working must fit with the individual's needs to help them achieve success. For many of the individuals we work with, they will require more than the minimum level of follow-up. This follow-up provides the opportunity to identify and discuss any additional concerns or job supports needed for a successful employment outcome. Let's take a look at the job coaching report. This report should be used to document hours. 20 hours of job coaching are included within a PBA. If additional hours are needed, please consult with the counselor. Job coaching reports are required whether within a PBA or when additional job coaching hours have been approved and authorized. The placement professional or job coach must provide follow-up at least every other week, and twice monthly communication updates continue until placement and retention services are closed. Please keep in mind that retention services, which includes follow-up, are an important component of the process and should not be neglected. When the job seeker has been on the job for 30 days, there is a check-in by the VRS counselor. You can see here where this step falls in the placement process. Keeping with the placement team approach and staying connected throughout the process, we want you to be aware the VRS counselor will make at least one check-in with the individual following their first 30 days of work. It's important for the VRS counselor to maintain the counseling relationship throughout and ensure that the individual has the supports they need in place to be successful in their employment. The final step in the placement process is a successful placement closure. This is PBA milestone 3 and is a payment milestone. In order to successfully close out placement and retention services, please ensure that the job is consistent with the employment plan goals and services. The individual and VRS agree that the employment is satisfactory and the individual is performing well on their job. They must be paid at or above federal, state, or local minimum wage, whichever is highest, and paid at or above customary rate of persons without disabilities with that employer. Substantial progress has been made towards consistently working the number of hours per week as outlined in the placement plan, and the work is in a competitive, integrated setting. Any ongoing supports are adequate to meet the individual's needs with respect to retaining employment. The 90 days of employment begins after any VRS paid training services, such as on-the-job training, have been completed. The 90 days of employment must be with the same employer and the same position unless the individual has made the informed decision for successive temporary employment assignments. The first part of that condition relates to starting the 90-day clock over when an individual accepts a different position within the same company or has the same position for 2 different companies during the 90 days. For example, a 90-day clock starts over when someone working at Target as a cart pusher receives a promotion to a cashier. The 90 days starts over with the first day as a cashier because there are new duties and likely a new supervisor. Likewise, if a person accepts a similar position with another company, for example, a person is working as a CNA for a nursing home and leaves that employer for another CNA job with a different company, the 90-day clock will begin again with the new employer. Successive temporary assignments is in reference to situations such as seasonal work or accepting different temporary assignments from a staffing agency, and the individual makes an informed choice that this meets their needs. For supported employment situations, follow-up services have been provided for a minimum of 90 days after the individual has reached employment stability on the job and has made the transition to extended ongoing supports. To ensure the individual has reached employment stability, please consult with the VRS counselor. The VRS record of service does not have to be closed before the community partner can receive the final PBA milestone payment, as VRS may still be involved in providing other services to the individual. For a successful closure from placement and retention services, you will need to provide VRS with a summary of the successful placement. You may provide the summary information details regarding the successful closure from placement and retention services using either the communication update form or an email with the same information that's requested on the communication update form, along with an invoice for the final milestone payment. Remember to include the employment verification details that we looked at on the communication update form. There is a tool called Placement and Retention Services Closure Summary Case Note Conditions that has been developed. Let's take a look at this tool. This is a tool to assist the placement professionals in determining closure and writing their summary case note when the placement and retention services file is closed. A successful placement involves a lot of time and effort. Take credit for all the work you do and the services you provide. We know that not all items will apply to every placement and retention services closure, but the form gives an idea of potential placement and retention services that may have been provided. If you have any questions about the placement and retention services process, this is a list of the placement specialists you can contact. You can also find information on the placement and retention services process along with the forms by following the link on the slide. Thank you for viewing this webinar.